The city never really slept, but my apartment building pretended to. By midnight, the hallway lights flickered to dim, and the hum of traffic outside dulled to something softer, almost like breathing. From my second-floor balcony, I could watch the neon signs blink across Main Street and hear the muffled bass from a nightclub a block away. I was Isabella Reed, 23, a design student finishing her last year at NYU. My friends called me Izzy, bright, messy, late to everything. But beneath the surface, I'd always been more cautious than I let on. Moving into this downtown building was my first act of rebellion after years of living safe, predictable lives under my parents' watchful eyes in Connecticut. The building itself was old, cracked paint, thin walls, the kind of place where you knew your neighbors whether you wanted to or not. That's how I noticed him. Ethan Cross. Apartment 6B, ***. The first time I saw him, it was late evening. I was carrying groceries up the stairs when he came down, shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the edge of a tattoo. Tall, mid-30s, striking in a way that made you look twice. He had that sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed like they'd seen too much, and a voice that carried even when he barely spoke. "You're new," he said, pausing on the landing. "Yeah. Isabella." I shifted the bag higher on my hip. 204. "Ethan." He nodded once. 6B. And then he walked past, leaving a faint trace of expensive cologne in the stale stairwell air. I learned quickly that Ethan wasn't like the other tenants. He rarely joined conversations in the mailroom, rarely lingered at the lobby's vending machines. But sometimes, very late, I heard his footsteps in the hall. Once, I passed his door and caught the faint glow of a TV playing static, as if he left it on purpose. The curiosity gnawed at me. It wasn't until the night my lock jammed that I truly let him in. I had just come back from a late class, the building too quiet, the key refusing to turn. I cursed under my breath, jiggling the knob, when a voice behind me made me jump. "Need help?" It was Ethan, carrying a black duffel bag. His eyes flicked to my trembling hands, then to the stubborn lock. Without waiting, he pulled out a multi-tool from his pocket, knelt, and in seconds, the door gave way. "You've done that before," I said cautiously. A faint smirk. "I've done a lot of things before." I should have left it at that. I should have thanked him, closed the door, and gone on with my night. But instead, I asked the question that had been burning. "What do you do?" His smirk faded. For a long beat, he just looked at me, like he was deciding whether to answer. Finally, he said, "I handle security." Something about the pause made me shiver. Over the next weeks, Ethan became a quiet constant in my life. He was there when I carried too many sketchbooks up the stairs. He was there when my radiator broke and the landlord ignored my calls. He was there when a man on the street shouted something obscene at me and Ethan's stare alone sent the guy retreating. But the more I saw him, the more questions grew. Why did he sometimes come home at 3 in the morning with bruised knuckles? Why did his curtains always stay drawn, even on the brightest days? And why did his gaze linger on me with an intensity that felt both protective and dangerous? One night, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph of me, sitting on my balcony, sketchbook in hand, taken from across the street. My chest tightened. I thought immediately of Ethan. Did he take it? Was he watching me? Or was he the one protecting me from someone else who was? As I stared at the photo, heart pounding, I heard it, footsteps in the hall. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. And then 3 short raps. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there, shadows carved across his face. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said softly. "Not after what I just saw." I didn't let Ethan in right away. I kept my hand on the door frame, the Polaroid burning against my palm like a secret no one should be holding. His eyes scanned my face, too sharp, too knowing, as if he could see the fear running beneath my skin. "What did you mean?" I asked slowly, "when you said after what you just saw?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. Someone was standing across the street with a camera, aiming it up at your window. My stomach dropped. "You saw them?" I followed them until they disappeared into the alley. "They're not just curious. They're watching you." His words should have terrified me, but instead, a strange wave of relief washed over me, relief that he wasn't the one who had taken the picture. Or at least, I wanted to believe he wasn't. "Why me?" I whispered. Ethan leaned closer, his voice a low rumble. "Because you're young, you're beautiful, and you don't see the danger that lives in this city." He held my gaze a moment too long. Something in his eyes flickered, part warning, part desire. The kind of look that promised protection but carried possession. I stepped aside. "Come in." The moment he crossed the threshold, the apartment felt smaller, darker. He didn't take off his jacket, didn't sit. Instead, he moved toward the balcony door and slid the curtain open just an inch, scanning the street below. "Do you lock this every night?" he asked. "Yes." "You will now," he said firmly. I should have been unnerved by his authority, but instead, I felt safer. Safer than I'd felt in weeks. When he finally turned back to me, his face softened. "I didn't mean to scare you, Izzy." "You did," I admitted, my voice cracking. "But I guess I needed it." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The city hummed outside, the refrigerator whirred, but inside the air buzzed with something unspoken. "You said you work in security?" I ventured. "Is that why you're good at following people?" He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say I've spent time in places where you either learn to watch, or you don't make it out." I wanted to ask what places, what he had done, but the words stuck. Instead, I found myself asking, "Why do you care if I'm safe?" Silence stretched between us. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. "Because the first time I saw you in that stairwell, I knew you were the kind of trouble I'd never forgive myself for ignoring." My breath caught. His words hung heavy, electric, filling the room. I should have ended it. I should have stood up, thanked him, sent him back across the hall. But my heart beat faster than reason, and when he reached across the table, fingers brushing mine, I didn't pull away. That night, everything blurred. One minute we were talking in whispers, the next his mouth was on mine. The kiss was fierce, urgent, as if he'd been holding it back for weeks. My back pressed against the counter, his hands on either side of me. Every alarm in my head rang, screaming stop, but my body leaned closer, desperate for the fire I'd been pretending I didn't crave. Hours later, I lay in his bed in apartment 6B, the city lights flickering through the blinds. His arm rested heavy across my waist, his breath steady against my neck. And though part of me wanted to freeze that moment, another part knew I'd crossed into something dangerous. Because when I looked at the dresser across from his bed, I saw it. A stack of photographs. Of me. Walking up the stairs with groceries. Sitting on my balcony sketching. Laughing on the phone. Even sleeping. I sat up, my pulse hammering. "Ethan, what is this?" He stirred, blinked, then sat up too. His expression didn't shift to surprise or guilt. Instead, it was calm. Controlled. "I told you someone's been watching," he said evenly. "I'm making sure I know more about them than they know about you." I held up one of the photos, my hands trembling. But these were taken from inside the building. From angles only you would have. He reached out, gently lowering the picture. "Izzy, listen to me. You don't understand what kind of people I've dealt with. If I'm watching you, it's not because I want to hurt you. It's because someone else already does." Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to believe him. And the worst part of me, the one that burned every time he touched me, didn't care about the difference. But that night, as I drifted in and out of uneasy sleep beside him, I dreamed of cameras clicking, of footsteps in the hall, of a shadowy figure watching through the blinds. And when I woke in the gray light of dawn, there was another envelope on the floor, slid under the door while we slept. I picked it up with shaking hands. Inside was a single line scrawled in thick, angry ink. Asterisk, "He can't protect you from me." Ethan read it over my shoulder. His jaw clenched. "They're getting closer," he muttered. But I couldn't stop staring at the handwriting. It was jagged, aggressive, and hauntingly familiar. Because I'd seen it before. In Ethan's sketchbook, the one he kept on the shelf by his couch. My blood ran cold. The sketchbook sat on Ethan's shelf like a small, waiting confession. I told myself I was only going to look for clues, a handwriting sample, a date, anything that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. I told myself I needed answers. I told myself I'd be careful. I should have left it alone. Instead, I opened it. The pages smelled faintly of coffee and graphite. At first, there were quick lines, gestures of hands and faces, little studies that looked like practice, like someone keeping his eye sharp. Then the drawings slowed and grew more detailed. A study of a balcony railing, the exact curve of my favorite chair, an inked sketch of my profile that made my stomach twist because he'd captured me less like a stranger and more like something he'd come to know from memory. At the back of the book, tucked between pages, was a sheet of paper. The letters slashed across it in the same jagged, confident stroke I'd seen on the envelopes. The words were short, clinical, as if planning a procedure. Asterisk, create proximity. Observe. Confirm. Remove variables. My hand went numb. Remove variables. The phrase tasted like a plan made for someone else's life. I slid the paper back into place and sat on his couch until my knees trembled. When he came home that evening, the apartment smelled of takeout and antiseptic. He set his bag down, hung his jacket like he always did, and for a moment everything looked ordinary. He laughed at some joke his phone made. He took off his shoes in the hallway. I watched him move the way you watch someone you're about to realize you never really knew. "Where have you been?" I asked too casually. "Work," he said. "A long night." He dropped onto the couch beside me and, before I could stop myself, reached for my hand. It was the same touch as before, warm, steady, and something in me flinched at the map of deception I'd just traced in his sketchbook. "I read your handwriting," I said. The words came out thin like glass. His hand stilled. "What?" "The envelopes. The letters. The style. I saw it in your notebook." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Did you write them, Ethan?" For a second his face did something I couldn't name, regret, maybe, or a shadow of apology. He looked at me like a man caught between two truths. "I did some things," he said finally, and his voice was low enough that I had to lean in to hear. "I wanted to protect you." "Protect me by spying on me?" I laughed, but the sound was raw. "By sending threats? By taking photos of me sleeping?" His shoulders rose as if under an invisible weight. "I followed someone who'd been watching you. I staged a few things to flush them out. The envelopes were bait, to see who would react." He met my eyes, and I could see how desperately he wanted me to understand. It was supposed to be a way to make the watcher make a mistake. I didn't want to frighten you. I wanted to keep you safe. "But you lied," I said, the hurt like a knife. "You made me believe I was the hunted. You made me come to you for shelter." The sentence ended with a bitter laugh. "You played me." He flinched at the word like it had struck him. "I didn't plan for this to go so far. I didn't plan to fall for you." His confession arrived like a thunderclap. For a dizzy second, all the anger and the longing and the betrayal braided together into something that left me blinking and raw. The Ethan I wanted to believe in, the protector, the man who'd fixed my lock, the one who made me feel steady, was tangled with something darker. The line between guardian and manipulator thinned until it broke. "I can't stay," I whispered. I meant the apartment. I meant the lie. I meant the place where his breath had warmed my neck. He stood quickly, and I watched the old, practiced calm become something brittle. "Izzy, don't say that." He moved toward me, voice stripped of softness. "I did it because I care. Because I—" "You care?" I echoed. "By making my life into your experiment? By erasing my agency?" The sentence hung, terrifying in its simplicity. He closed the distance between us until he was so close I could see the flecks of gray at the edge of his irises. His hand went to my wrist, gentle at first, then with an edge I didn't like. "You don't understand," he said, quieter now, a different sound. "You don't know the people I've been trying to stop. You don't see the things I see when the city is asleep." I matched his gaze, unblinking, and for a moment I thought I saw fear flaring there, not for him, but for what might come if he wasn't the one in control. "You don't get to decide how I'm kept safe," I said. "You don't get to make me afraid and then claim heroism." There was a beat of silence, And then he let go as if my words stung him. "I wanted you to see what danger looks like," he admitted. "So you trust me to shield you from it. I thought, if you were dependent, I could keep you here." His confession was small and terrible. I thought I could keep you. The room bent in on itself. I tasted metal in my mouth and knew, in some hard way, that this was what obsession sounded like when it wore the face of concern. "I have to leave," I said, "because not leaving now would be something I could never forgive myself for. Tonight." He laughed, a short, sharp sound, and it wasn't a laugh that made sense to the word. "Leave," he said. "You can't just walk away from this, Izzy." His hand closed again at my wrist, and this time I felt it. The pressure was firm, a line drawn in flesh. Panic flared. My feet moved before thought. I wrenched free and bolted for the door. "Don't," he said, and the command was something other than plea. It had a line of menace that wrapped around it like wire. I reached for the handle. It was locked. Not by me. He had locked it from the hallway. The deadbolt had clicked into place with a finality that made my breath stutter. I slammed my shoulder into the door. Twice. The wood held. Ethan's steps came up behind me, measured, precise. "You don't want to do this," he murmured. "Not like this." I turned, chest heaving, hair in my face, eyes burning. "Let me out," I said. "Now." He reached for me again, but this time before his hand could close, a sound, a small, frantic knock, rattled the front door. Someone else, loudly at the hall door below, an urgent voice calling up. "Isabella! Izzy! Are you there?" I heard shouting. "Are you okay?" It was Marta, the woman from 3A who kept a plant obsession and knitted at the building's little comic relief. I had a second to think, to reach, to move. I darted toward the window, wrenched back the curtain, and called her name like a live thing. "Marta! Help! Please!" Ethan froze, his face a mask of rage and calculation. The hallway door banged again. Someone else had joined, voices overlapping now, and then footsteps on the landing. The building's ancient intercom chirped to life. "Is everything okay up there?" "Police!" A neighbor's quavering voice. I was shaking, but adrenaline made me quick. I yanked my phone from my pocket. My fingers fumbled but finally found 911. "Please," I gasped to the operator. "I'm at 204. My neighbor, he's not letting me leave. Please send someone." Ethan's expression changed while I spoke. Surprise, and then something like a reconfiguration. His plan had been interrupted. He moved faster than I expected, toward the balcony door, intent on blocking me. But the police were already on their way down the hallway. I could hear them in the stairwell, loud and a little uncertain. He lunged. I stepped back and pivoted, stumbling into the couch. The sketchbook, the evidence, slid to the floor, pages fanning like a fallen confession. In the scuffle, it became everything. His plotting, his handwriting, the photographs tucked between pages. Marta's voice came up the stairs, louder, shriller. Then the firm boots of a uniform appeared at my door. Ethan cursed and, in the chaos, shoved past me toward the balcony and then the stairwell. He would flee, I thought, or try to retrieve something. One of the officers reached him first, hands on his shoulder. "Sir, you need to step back," said a voice commanding. He turned like a man unmoored, eyes wild. For a beat, he looked at me as if pleading, as if what he had done could be undone by a look. Then his jaw set like iron. He let himself be handcuffed, but not before his last glance burned into me, an expression that mixed regret, possessiveness, and a dangerous, stubborn certainty that what he'd done had been for a purpose only he understood. Outside, the action unfolded in quick efficiency. Questions, lights, neighbors pressed to windows. I sat on the couch and felt the world tilt back toward ordinary gravity as Ethan was led away in cuffs, his hands glinting against the neon city light. He didn't scream, didn't fight. He merely stared, and when our eyes met at last, the man who'd been my protector and my betrayer said nothing. The silence between us was its own verdict. The officers took statements. Marta hugged me until I trembled into her shoulder. The sketchbook and photographs were bagged as evidence. The police officer, young, polite, with tired eyes that still looked like they'd been to one too many bad places, told me they had probable cause to detain Ethan for unlawful confinement and stalking. He would be held for questioning, they said. They suggested a restraining order, a safe place to stay. Someone called my parents. I called the building manager and packed a bag. You'd think when someone betrayed you so thoroughly, your life would split cleanly into before and after. It didn't. The after arrived like a slow leak, a coldness that seeped under the skin. People told me I was brave. Friends said I had done the right thing. The law began its patient grind. Ethan sat in an interrogation room under fluorescent light, and I sat with coffee that tasted like nothing, signing forms and giving careful statements about intrusive photos and staged scares and the letters that smelled like graphite and old coffee. Weeks later, the trial was a dull monument. Depositions, lawyers with neutral expressions, testimony about a man whose obsession had been meticulous and frighteningly systematic. When the judge read the conditions of a protective order, I felt something lift and then a hollow settle. Ethan had pleaded not guilty. He claimed he'd tried to protect me. He claimed his methods had been misguided but not malicious. The jury would decide. The city would watch. I wanted to believe that the law could make the world right again, but laws are stitches, not miracles. I moved out of the building within a month. I left a note with Marta and took a small apartment uptown with windows that looked over a busier street. At night, I pulled the curtains closed and lay awake imagining all the ways a person could be seen without being known. Sometimes I would wake with the memory of his hand on mine and the knowledge that the same hand had once closed the deadbolt. After everything, the truth remained complicated. Ethan had wanted to shield me, but his way of doing it was a map of himself, not of my life. He'd created fear to prove he could remove it. He'd meant to make me need him, to make himself indispensable. Whether love had lived in him at any point, or whether the line between devotion and possession had been erased long ago, I could not say. The city moved on. Summer bled into fall. I kept my sketchbook now, drawing the light as it moved across the room, letting lines be lines and not plans. Sometimes I drew hands, the way they can hold a cup without holding a person. Sometimes I drew doorways, open and empty and safe for the first time. On the day the restraining order became permanent, I stood at my new balcony and breathed in the clean October air. I felt hollow and bruised and alive in equal measures. I had survived someone who had turned protection into a weapon. I had learned that self-preservation is not a weakness and that safety is not a thing anyone else can hand you like a gift. It is something you build again, plank by plank. From time to time, the memory of his confession, "I thought I could keep you," returned like an echo. I would close my eyes and remember the sketchbook's last page, the neat slashes of ink that read like a map. And then I would take up my own pen and draw, slowly, deliberately, lines of a life I chose. The city hummed beneath me, indifferent and eternal, and I promised myself, in the quiet that followed, that no one would map me without my consent again. I did not know if I would ever forgive Ethan. I did not know if he had loved me in the way people mean when they say the word, or if he'd loved a version of me he built from shadows. I only knew this: whatever had been between us was over. The last lock had been turned, but I had my own keys now.